like that music. It's kind of fun. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Showcase Broadcast Studios. This is Real Talk with Michael Wardy. I'm a certified financial planner and senior strategic director here at Source Advisors. And I'm welcoming today, especially with what's going on with the environment and everything else. I'm happy to invite and welcome in John Froberg. John, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is so cool.
Thank you. John is, and correct me if I'm wrong on your title. Actually, give us your title because I don't want to misspeak.
So I guess my title is technically private wealth advisor, although I don't love that title. I don't really love any of the titles that are left in the financial industry, just because there's so many people doing so many different things, and there's not enough words for those differences to go around. But I guess technically that's my title.
Okay, that's fair. I know when I started in what is now called wealth management, financial planning, when I started, my title was stockbroker. So it's evolved. It's definitely evolved. Of course, that
sure
was
has.
back in the early 90s. So yeah, there's definitely been some changes. So John, just to start out, give everybody, and thank you everyone for joining. If you do have questions, comments, thoughts, please go ahead. If you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, click on the comment section and then post your questions there. If we don't get to it, don't think that I'm ignoring you. We will, John will probably, I'll send it over to John and he'll respond back to you with any answers that you need. Just to start out with, give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. I've been in wealth management for a number of years now. I spent the first part of my career with a firm called Siller & Cohen. It's a great firm out of Westchester and New York City. And then I joined this RIA called Ironbridge Wealth Counsel earlier this year. We're an ensemble practice, so we're a group of advisors that all have different specialties. And I'm loving it.
That's great. That's great. All right. So I know nowadays everyone is focused more, and again, history of being a stockbroker, and I'll air quote that, the transition into wealth management, estate planning, financial planning. There's been a lot of transition over the decades. How do you define wealth management? Or what is, not even that, how do you define wealth? Because that's something that is kind of changed and shifted and deviated over the years, but how would you define it?
Sure. I think there's a few different good definitions for wealth, and they all kind of get at the same thing, but there's different ways of saying it. So to me, wealth is really about freedom. It's basically just doing what you want, when you want, how you want, with who you want. I think people think about wealth and they think about money, and having a lot of money is certainly one way to kind of get some of that freedom, but it's not the only way. And again, the wealth is really about freedom. The other really good definition I heard of wealth is that wealth is basically making money while you sleep. So wealth is, apartments paying you rent. Go ahead.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's apartments paying you rent. It's stocks that are growing in value. It could be a basement full of computers cranking out code. And the reason that's what it is because no matter how much money you make, if you really want to be financially free, if you really want to own your time, you have to be able to make money while you're sitting on a beach, sipping a drink or hanging out with your family, because otherwise, no matter how much money you make, you still have to do that thing to make the money. So you can have a lot of zeros on your balance sheet and not be that wealthy. You can have not a ton in assets and actually be quite wealthy.
It's a good way to look at it, and a little bit different.
Yeah,
people just usually look at the bottom line, not even the bottom line of the T chart as far as assets are concerned. I have a lot of that, but like you said, if you don't have a lot, if you have a lot on one side and you have even more on the other side, liabilities, that where you're struggling constantly and not able to sleep, how much wealth is really, can you appreciate in that? I'm going to switch over to financial planning real quick.
Sure.
You and I are both certified financial planners. I'm not practicing actively. I know you are. And that's another area that has evolved dramatically. I became a CFP back in 2001, still brand new. I mean, nobody was really claiming to be or bragging. I remember one of my colleagues when I was at UBS said, "Oh, I'm a CFP. I don't know. I just took the stupid test and it took me an hour to do or something like that. I don't remember." But then he was CFP and then he blew it off. It's a lot different now. It's a lot different. Is there really an appreciation from a client perspective in working with a CFP? Is it just 3 letters that you say, "Hey, we're a CFP. You have to work with us"? Like, and I know this is not a practice question. I'm just thinking about it, and I always thought that there was value when I was in practice. I just thought there was value in having that additional education, knowledge, experience, in providing insight for clients. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So I think you almost have to zoom out and think about what any designation is, right? And so what a designation tells you is that there is some baseline fundamental understanding and education that's been given. Now, I mentioned right at the top, like, I don't even like the term wealth advisor because there's so many different professionals that say wealth advisor that do different things. And I'm not saying any of those things are even better or worse. They're just different. And so I think the same is true. I think when you work with a CFP, you know that that person at least has some comprehensive training. They know the basics of financial independence and retirement planning. They know the basics of investment planning and sort of the most current academic research on building portfolios. They know the basics on estate planning and business owner planning. But I don't think you can stop there, right? Because no matter how good you are, nobody's an expert at all of that stuff. You can't be the best estate planner, best investment planner, best retirement planner, best business planner in the world. There's no way you can be all those things, right? So I think the CFP is a really good place to start to filter. If you want somebody that's got some comprehensive abilities, that's a good way to filter and say, well, I don't just need a portfolio manager. I really need a planner. But I think from there, you got to do some more homework and figure out, hey, what are the things that are most important to me? And is this person an expert at those things?
So you have people coming into I know you don't call it the brokerage industry anymore, but they go into the top brokerage firms, banks, and they graduate college. They were doing one thing, and now they want to get into this and figure it out. They don't have the credentials or the credibility. I'll give you a perfect example. Customer of a bank comes in and they just had an inheritance of $400,000. They sit down with the banker. The banker says, "Hey, you need to invest in this money market account. We'll get you over to our financial planner, whatever their title is at the bank, and they'll take care of it, and they put you into an annuity." Maybe the wrong approach. I don't know. Of course, it's case by case. What are your thoughts on doing that? And when people are starting, because we're seeing that shift, that consistent shift in wealth, and it's going to the next generations and continue, how should they approach this? What should their first steps be, especially if they don't know? You have people that are working their daily jobs and all of a sudden they get this inheritance of $1 million, $2, $3 million.
Sure.
Like, I want to go buy a house. Where should they start with planning? Where should they start with all this?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so there is nothing wrong with a pure investment manager. There's nothing wrong with a professional who just manages investments, and that's what they do, and they might do that very well. I think whether you hire a professional to do it or not, you have to start, and a lot of people miss starting with thinking about what are the objectives of my portfolio. So you can actually do this experiment with friends, and it's kind of fun. You don't have to ask them how much money they have or anything like that, but ask 3 people, hey, what are the objectives of your investments? And sometimes you'll get, I don't know, but a lot of times it's like, well, I expect them to grow, or I expect them to help me retire. Well, those are good answers, but they're super vague. I mean, how much do you expect the portfolio to grow, and how much risk are you willing to take to achieve that? How likely is it to grow that much? How much money do you need to retire? How do you need your portfolio to perform to get you there? And what should the portfolio look like in retirement when you're living off of it? And I think a lot of people miss doing that first step. And you could do that yourself and take that to an investment manager, or you could hire a professional that helps you do that kind of work. But it's like, if you need a hammer and you buy the best drill in the world, it's not going to do you any good, right? You might have,
Unless you take the back of the drill and start hammering, but that will not long. That won't last long.
Which is what a lot of people do with their investment portfolio. It's like, I've got the best portfolio in the world, and maybe you do, but if it's the wrong portfolio, it's still not doing you any good.
That's a good point. Is the focus for you, for your clients, always retirement? And I ask because I always hear people, and I've talked to wealth managers as well, and they're like, what are you going to do for retirement? Are you ready for retirement? Shouldn't the question be, do you want to retire?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's broader than that. So again, I think planning is a super individual specific thing, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit.
Yes.
A little bit later on, why it's so unique to the person. But when people talk about retirement, what most people really want is to maintain their lifestyle for as long as they live and take care of their families. Mm-hmm. And so retirement is kind of like the best example of when you're really forced to think about that, because most of us hopefully won't get too sick to work before we want to stop working. Most of us won't get fired and unable to find a job for the rest of our career. So the most likely point where your income turns off is when you choose to turn it off, and that's retirement, right? But the real goal isn't retirement. The real goal is that someday I'm working because I want to, not because I have to. Mm-hmm. And retirement might be the thing that creates that, but it might be something else. So I think it's really a broader question. Again, there's all kinds of individual goals, but the big goal is make my money problems go away, right? And we all have money problems. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or you're just starting out. We have different money problems, but we all have money problems. And the big one is, it's wealth. Can I do what I want, when I want, with who I want, how I want? Or do I have to spend my time, working for some income, or do I have to give up some of the things I want because I can't afford them?
So you mentioned, thank you for sharing that. But you had mentioned earlier about apartments paying you rental income.
Oh, sure.
Are you a big fan? And I don't know if we should go down this path of the real estate market, but just out of curiosity. And I had some guests here 2 weeks ago talking about the real estate market and what's going on in the Chicagoland market.
Sure.
Are you a big fan of real estate right now? Is it overinflated? Do you still think there's good opportunities? Is this not a question that you want to have asked?
Oh, well, I'm far from a real estate investment expert or professional. Mm-hmm. I know plenty of people who do that work well, but it's far from my focus. So I wouldn't, I certainly wouldn't speak to that. Although I know plenty of folks who could. So if people have questions, I'm happy to point them in the right direction. But what I will say is this, and it goes back to my earlier answer. It's like, well, is real estate a good investment? It's like, well, it depends what you want. Right? Every investment in real estate's a super broad category. So any investment has, pros, cons, risks, opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when you're talking about investing, you have to mention real estate because it happens to be an asset class that people have built more wealth in than really any other. We could talk about why that is in a minute, if you want, but again, I don't think you can speak to any investment category and say that's necessarily a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on the person, and it depends on what they need their portfolio to do and what risks they're willing to take.
Yeah. And I see that as well. I hear people saying, oh, I just want to buy real estate. There's more to it. And it's not just objectives. You have to have knowledge and a baseline to go off of, because just buying real estate to rent, it's not quite that easy.
Yeah. It's like, what does that even mean? I mean, you can buy real estate in all these different flavors, right? Mm-hmm. You could buy a publicly traded REIT. That's real estate. And you don't have to have a ton of knowledge to do that. That's just, it's a publicly traded REIT. You can assess that the way you would assess a stock. And there's plenty of advisors who can tell you. You can go a little bit more private than that and buy a private REIT or a private real estate fund. So you're giving up a little liquidity. Maybe there's only redemptions every quarter. but there's some nice features there too. And again, I'm certainly not recommending any investments. I'm just illustrating kind of what's out there. Or you can actually buy a property yourself. And that's like the most private form, because it's yours. You can charge whatever you want in rent as long as you can get somebody in there, and you can kind of make all the decisions. But if something breaks, you got to fix it. Right?
That's the worst part.
Yes.
Those phone calls at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So I don't know that people always realize. I mean, the investment world is so broad. You can invest in anything, and you can invest in all kinds of different flavors in terms of how much control you want, how much risk you want to take, what kinds of risks you want to take, how much liquidity you want. There's all these factors. And again, that's why it starts with the planning, because if you just try to make good investments, there's too many options. You have to narrow it down somehow.
It's so true. So for someone just starting out, I'll give you, okay, so someone graduated college, they have a great job. I know that that's the right time, even before then.
Yeah, sure.
Before them is the right time to start planning. Although when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, you're not really thinking about planning for your future. But somebody that just graduated, that's heading into the workforce for the first time in career, what would you recommend? Would you recommend sitting with a wealth manager like yourself, or just start to build up some assets and then talk to someone?
I don't think it's ever too early to meet with a professional. If you have questions that you'd like a professional's opinion on, I would encourage everyone to do their homework. If you're going to sit down with somebody, make sure you understand the fees. Make sure you understand the value they're going to be providing to you, and make sure you understand their incentives. Right? I think that's really important. You want to understand. Why is it in their best interest to do a good job for you, and make sure it is in their best interest to do a good job for you, because that's different. Go ahead.
Right. So if I know there's planners out there that charge hourly. There are planners that charge a fixed fee, an annual fee, quarterly fee. There are financial planners that charge assets under management. They're all right for the different people. What would you recommend, or what are your thoughts on going one way versus another way? Is it just it's based on each type of scenario?
It's really based on the scenario, but look, I'm a big believer in quantifiable value when you can. Right? So if a let's use a fixed fee, because it's probably the easiest example of this. So if an advisor is going to charge you a fixed fee, where are you going to get that fee back? Where are the places where your situation is going to look X or Y or Z % better that kind of covers the dollars of that fee? So I think it's really important homework to do. I think it's probably good to meet with a few different types of advisors that do different things, or that charge differently. I know the word fiduciary gets tossed around a lot. So do you think people want to hear a little bit about that? We can talk about that.
Let's touch on that, because I know for a lot of our viewers and listeners, they're probably not even thinking about a fiduciary or ever even heard the word outside of maybe a movie.
Yeah. It's become such a buzzword, but I'm far from the expert here, but my understanding is that a fiduciary, whether it's in the financial industry or anywhere else, is just somebody who's legally obligated to act in your best interests. So legally speaking, they have to, they can't put you in a product because it's a good deal for them. If they're going to put you in a product, they have to be able to document and demonstrate that, at least to the best of their knowledge, that product is appropriate for you. And so that's a really important distinction, because, I think there's been you mentioned stockbrokers, right, in the past, and there's been some kind of, I guess I would say, bad press over the years about stockbrokers. And I think that's really a misunderstanding, right? There's nothing wrong with being a person who sells stocks. There's nothing wrong with being a person who sells anything.
Right.
The problem is if you're a salesman, but you're presenting yourself as an advisor, and so the customer thinks that they're a client of an advisor who's giving them advice to act in their best interest, but really they're a customer of a salesman whose job is to sell a product, right?
That's a mouthful, but yeah, I get it.
So if you, yeah, so like, there's nothing wrong with a car salesman, right? Because
Right.
you know it's their job to sell you a car.
Right.
And so you go to the auto dealer, you go to the auto dealer, and they're going to sell you a car, and you know that's what they're going to do. And so you're probably going to go to 3 or 4 and get some different opinions, and you're probably going to talk to some friends and get some advice. There's nothing wrong with that person being a car salesman.
Right.
But if you're meeting an insurance salesman and you think you're meeting an advisor, so you don't do your homework on your own and talk to 3 or 4 other insurance salesmen and get some professional advice about whether you even need insurance and what type of insurance you need, and talk to some friends because you think it's that person's job to do that work for you, that's a problem. And so that's where the fiduciary thing comes in. A fiduciary is legally obligated to act in your best interest, whereas a salesman isn't. And that's okay. It's just their job to sell you a product, and you can decide if you want to buy that product or not.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. John, thank you for joining. I know we're getting close to that half hour, but before we go, a couple of things. First, any final thoughts? Any advice, guidance, any just high level, don't forget this or think about this as we're coming to the close of the first quarter of 2023. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So we talked about it a minute, or we kind of started to touch on it, but didn't quite go there. Start now. So whether you hire an advisor or not, the thing that I would really advise people to do is spend some time, think about what you have today, think about what you want 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and think about what it's going to take to get there. I think people get scared away from planning because they think they're going to have to do things they don't want to do, or they're not going to like what they see. We can all, myself included, and I do this every day, right?
Yeah.
We can all make small changes that we won't even feel the difference of, but that over time will build up and make a massive impact. So don't get scared away. Start really small. Start small enough so that you're not even really going to feel it, but spend that time and think about it. Think about what you want over time, and then figure out how to get there. And again, I just think the best investment you can make is your time and your thought.
That's great. That's great thoughts, great insight. And thank you again, John. If people want to reach out to you and contact you, obviously they can refer back to the this presentation, this show. But how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great way. I'm on LinkedIn, just John Froberg. They can also go to ironbridgewc.com. And I'm on the website there, and they can get in touch with me that way.
Perfect. All right. Thank you again, John. And probably what we'll do is we'll have you come back in the maybe third quarter, maybe even the end of the year to see what's going on, any changes that have taken place, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right.
I'd love to.
Very good. John, thank you again for joining. Thank you for listening out there. Definitely share this with anybody that you think is transitioning, that wants to learn more about financial planning. Share the recording, pass it on to anybody else. Definitely would appreciate that. And I think everybody would appreciate learning more about building wealth and financial planning and all the planning matters that come into account. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Be well. Take care, John.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.